All right, thank you for tuning in on AWANI with me, Nabila Khalida. And right now we're in the conversation of the potential US recessions and about the potential impact on Malaysia, not just Malaysia, but the other countries as well in the same region, and whether China's recovery can actually help save the global economy. Because previously China has helped to save the global economy in 2009, also during the pandemic, 2022 and 2023. But for now, in 2024, what should we expect? So to discuss further on this, we have Mr. Teng Boo, the CEO of Capital Dynamics, with me right now at his office. Thank you for joining me. Perhaps the first question, is it going to be end of this year, or we are already in the recession for US?
I guess if you look at the usual indicators, the US doesn't seem to be in a recession. But if you look at some of the leading indicators, leading signs, I think the US should be, if it's not in the recession, I think it should be starting a recession pretty soon. In fact, based on many surveys done in US, majority of the Americans think that the US is really in a recession. That's based on the ordinary Americans. So to answer your question, I think within the next couple of months, the signs will be a lot clearer that the recession in US probably has started, is going to start soon.
But why now, Mr. Tan? Why now? It could be happen earlier than this, but why now specifically?
Okay, that's a very good question and a very difficult question. Because the US interest rates were raised starting March 2022 very aggressively, and then a lot of the traditional indicators have given warning signs last year, and last year there was no recession, so why now? Because if you look at the US economy, consumer spending is the most important driver of the US economy. If consumers in US spend, recovery. If consumers in US stop spending, recession. So in the case of America, if you go back to the 2020 pandemic, the American government under Trump and Biden, they panicked. They really panicked. They introduced a lot of fiscal policies to save the economy. They spent, if you count in total, there's one estimate that the US government in those few years spent about 11 to 12 trillion US dollars. That is a lot of money. So that spending benefited the ordinary Americans. It helped them, especially even if I don't have a job, I can spend because I got payments transferred from the government to my pockets. So that helped to boost the savings and the income of the ordinary Americans. But those are temporary. So by May, April this year, the American consumers have already used up all those savings, all those special income that they receive. In fact, by May, April this year, the American consumers have already used up their own personal savings. That is when you got to use your own money and your own savings, and the interest rate is so high, that's when you feel the pain. Instead of buying expensive stuff, I got to buy cheaper stuff. So that's where the slowdown starts to kick in. So it's because the excess savings of the American consumers are all used up already. And as I mentioned earlier, whatever the US consumers do will impact the US economy. And that already signs are there. The consumer spending has slowed down quite sharply. Consumers there are very sensitive to inflationary pressure. Just like anywhere in the world, just like Malaysia. Cost of living has gone up, right? So they feel the impact, and some more, their interest rates are so high. That's where everything all come together, and the economy will give way.
And approaching towards that, how long is it going to take to impact Malaysia, the after effect, and also how bad is it going to be, the recession?
There will, whatever it is, the America's economy is still the largest in the world, right? It will definitely have some impact on what we do in Malaysia, that's for sure. The question is, will the impact be large or small, right? There could be many ways it will impact Malaysia in terms of our exports to United States, in terms of semiconductor FDI into Malaysia, because many of the American semiconductor companies are large investors in Malaysia. So it could be through FDI, it could be through exports. Fortunately for the Malaysian economy, it's been, in terms of exports, in terms of FDI, is shifted towards China. For the last many years, China has been our biggest FDI investor. For the last 10-15 years, China has been Malaysia's biggest trading partner. And in terms of foreign relations between China and Malaysia, it's very good. So in that sense, Malaysia is in a lucky position that the Chinese economy will be able to offset, to cushion whatever recession that the US is going to be experiencing.
Should we prepare any policies to brace or the cushion the impact towards Malaysia? What should the government do as for now?
I think to give credit to the government, this sort of policies, you cannot wait until the crisis happens, then only you start to implement the policies. You have to be forward-looking. So I think our present government has been very forward-looking. Our Prime Minister has been very active in making sure that our foreign relations with US, with the West, with China, and with ASEAN has been on a much more healthy, balanced position. In the past, we could say that we are probably biased towards United States and Japan. So now I think we got to make sure that we don't keep relying on a policy which has got a lot of risks. So the present government, I think, maybe could see that we need to have a foreign policy that is more beneficial to Malaysia, which is why having closer relations with China economically, politically, culturally is of great help. So those have already been there, have been done already. And things like Malaysia applying to be a member of BRICS, that is looking ahead. You won't get the benefit immediately, but looking ahead, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years from now, you benefit from it. And the visa-free policy between China and Malaysia, that has also helped.
And the US versus China has always been on the debate for the longest time. And should we, what can I expect in the future? Because China has saved us a few times before. So is China going to be the savior again for this one?
I think so. It's not just saving Malaysia's economy, but
the
globally. Because the US government spent too much during the pandemic. So their fiscal deficit, their budget deficit is very high. For this financial year, 2024, it's expected to be about 7.2%. During a US economy that has got full employment, where the GDP is still growing. Now, normally, when your economy is doing well, you take the opportunity to reduce your budget deficit, so that when a recession comes, you can use the budget deficit to stimulate your economy. But the US government, whether it's under Trump or Biden, have been very irresponsible. They didn't do that. Their budget deficit is still extremely high. So when the US hits a recession, what are they going to do? Overspend again? That is bad. Then your rating, your credit rating will be cut, and will lead to a round of vicious side effects. Whereas in the case of China, during the pandemic, the last 4 years, the Xi Jinping government has been very disciplined because they learned from the mistake of 0809. In 0809, China spent too much and then created a lot of adverse consequences. Now this time they say, no, let's do it steadily, step by step. As a result of that, China's fiscal deficit is only about 3% of GDP. So in other words, China has got a lot of leeway, a lot of room to use stimulus fiscal policy to support Chinese domestic economy, which benefit Malaysia. If the Chinese domestic consumption goes up, we sell more durians, we sell more kopi, whatever it is, and it will help to offset whatever negative impulse that is going to come from America.
And that brings to my next question, which is towards about the future US election. That high probability of Trump being elected for the next US president, and that is not a good sign, where it will impact not just the economy, but the geopolitical tensions that's already happening right now. So what can you say? What are the potential disadvantages, I would say, if Trump being elected?
Let me be clear on that first. Whether it is Democrat or Republican, the US-China relationships will still remain very difficult, right? If Trump comes in, there are certain benefits of that in terms of US-China. If Democrat comes in, there are certain major disadvantages in terms of US-China relationships. So whether it's Democrat or Republican, in terms of US relationship, it really makes no difference. The one wish I would make to the American politicians is, don't create imaginary enemies. You know, you can be friends with countries all over the world. Right? Leaving that aside, you're right, the evidence show that Trump most likely will win. If you base on what he did in his first presidential term, it was very unpredictable, right? He did so many things that nobody ever expected, even the old Republican Party never expected. Will he be the same Trump this time? I think so. I think he will be. I think Trump himself doesn't even know what he's going to do next. So that's how unpredictable he is. And he looks at things quite differently from a typical leader of a superpower. It's like as if he's already told Taiwan, look, I already spent too much defending you, Taiwan. You know, and you, Taiwanese, you have robbed 100% of my semiconductor. Right? Okay, you pay more. So let's say he becomes president, and let's say he does that. In a way, it's good. Then at least the Taiwan issue doesn't become a potential factor for a US-China crisis. Then at least Taiwan, the importance of Taiwan will be lowered in terms of US, and therefore Taiwan, the DPP in Taiwan, the pro-independent people in Taiwan will not be so emboldened to purposely go and antagonize China. That would be good. But how can you predict? Who knows? The Ukrainian crisis will be over because Trump and Putin are good friends. You could tell Putin, okay, that's it, let's call it quits. So all the thousands of Ukrainians who were killed for no reason. But in terms of Middle East, Trump is, in the past, is seen to be very pro-Israel. That is where China comes in. Because China is playing an increasingly important role in the Middle East. China brokered the agreement between Iran and Saudi Arabia. China brought 14 Palestinian factions into Beijing to come to an agreement to work together. That's the Beijing Declaration. So you have Trump, who is one-sided, and then you have China, who is more balanced, that will help to balance the Middle East crisis. With regards for Malaysia, to some extent we are lucky because we are a small player. Right? Are we important to America? Well, yes and no. Are we important to China? Yes and no. You know? So in that sense, our current government has navigated this situation very well. Whether your question is, how are we going to navigate the China-US relationship if Trump is the president? I think that is a question that our foreign minister and our prime minister are discussing very, very extensively.
But what's important, we have a natural stance on that, and we are benefiting from that war, actually, from that Cold War between US and China. And but does Malaysia, by joining the BRICS, will give any impact? I mean,
long term, those benefits, I see more benefits than disadvantages, but they are long term. I think what I'm thinking about is because our Prime Minister has been very vocal in the support of the Palestinian people, right? I'm not sure how, if Trump is the president, I'm not sure how Trump is going to look at that. I have no clue. I don't think anybody has an idea as to how Trump will react to a moderate Muslim country that has now made his stance very clear that, look, whatever is happening in Gaza is wrong. You must stop.
And that's on what's happening outside Malaysia. Let's talk about Malaysia domestically. Ringgit has seen an appreciation trajectory where it shows the movement of 4.4 to 4.5 ringgit compared to US dollar. And any comment on this? And should we expect more appreciation in the future, or what's the expectations?
I think the appreciation of the ringgit, I'm happy with that because it confirms my prediction that I made much earlier. I've done quite a number of YouTube videos on the ringgit versus the US dollar, and the last video that I did was March this year, early this year, where I said that, look, this will be my last video on the ringgit because I think the worries about the ringgit depreciating are
gone
over.
already.
It's gone. They are gone because the ringgit will start to appreciate. So far, I'm happy because that's what has happened, and we see that continuing because US will be in a recession. The Federal Reserve has to slash interest rate. The interest rate differential between the ringgit and the US dollar will narrow. And not only will the ringgit benefit other emerging countries, you know, rupiah, peso and all will benefit. So that trend will continue. How, the question is not whether it will continue, the question is the speed. How fast, how slow will the ringgit continue to appreciate? That depends a lot on how severe the US recession will be. That depends on how bad the US bear market will be, right? Because should the just stock markets plunge and the recession starts to kick in, you can be very sure the US Federal Reserve will slash the interest rate very fast. That's what they did in 2020, that's what they did in 2008. From 5% down to 0 in like 6 months. Should that happen, then the ringgit probably will, my own target is year-end 440, 450. But should that happen, then the ringgit may even strengthen to 420, 430. But look, my forecast is not important. What is important is the speed. Our central bank doesn't want the ringgit to weaken too fast, doesn't want the ringgit to strengthen too fast. That is bad for consumers, that is bad for business community. When the ringgit goes up, there are people who benefit, there are people who lose. When the ringgit weakens, there are people who benefit, people who lose.
Yeah.
So if you move too fast, the community, the economy cannot adjust. So Bank Negara, that's why Bank Negara says they want to maintain the OPR at 3% until the end of the year.
But this appreciation is said to be due to fear of the Fed cutting the interest rates in September FOMC meeting. So after the FOMC meeting, and it is expected to reduce 25 basis points, will the ringgit continues to appreciate?
That's a $1 million question, you know. First thing is, you're looking at multiple moving parts. Our exchange rate is not just determined by our own monetary policy and our own fiscal policy. The ringgit versus US dollar is determined also by what the US government does. It's also determined by global economic conditions, which is also dependent on what happens to China, right? So if you have a situation where US economy weakens, stock market drops, Chinese economy remain robust, in that kind of scenario, I think the need, the pressure for Bank Negara to cut OPR fast and a lot will be reduced, because then the Malaysian economy will still be quite resilient. The objective is not to reduce interest rate, the objective is to maintain GDP growth, employment growth at a healthy rate. So if the Bank Negara, if the Malaysian government can maintain a GDP growth of 4-5% and healthy employment growth without cutting interest rate, they won't cut interest rate, because our budget deficit is not that low. Our budget deficit is 5 to 6%. We want to reduce that. And from the government's point of view, a responsible government will always need to make sure that you have backup policies. When the worst happens, what can you do? So I don't want to simply cut my interest rate and then really some crisis happens, then I got no interest rate to cut. Or if I keep spending, when bad times come, then I got no money left to spend. So a responsible government will make sure that the interest rate is kept at a level that doesn't jeopardize your GDP growth and employment growth. Yeah? And a fiscal policy whereby you make it healthy so that in the next recession, you got something to boost the economy.
Great, amazing. Okay, perhaps before we end this discussion, just an outlook for Malaysia's economy situation right now. Based on the stats by Dawson, it's going on a positive trajectory. So what's the reality here, and how do you foresee it on the years coming?
This year, I think second quarter was 5.8. That 5.8 was probably a bit too strong. So I think full year 2024, if we can have 5.3, 5.5, that is brilliant. Yeah? Because you see, the semiconductor recovery is not across the board. People use the word semiconductor in a very loose way. Some sectors of the semicon industry haven't recovered. In fact, they're slowing down. Some sectors of the semicon industry, which is basically linked to AI and data centers, are booming. But those like smartphones and all those, or automotive, they're not enjoying that kind of recovery. So overall, the semicon industry probably, now it's 2024, will probably see a peak pretty soon, because I don't expect the growth in AI demand for the chips to be sustaining at this pace. That has to come down. So overall, there's nothing left to replace the demand from data centers and the AI side. Smartphones, everybody got smartphones already. There's no need for replacement. Auto sector is on the weak side. EV is only coming only from China. So overall, semicon would be, I think, patchy. The growth will be very patchy. Some sectors will grow, some will be weakening. Overall, it will not be that impressive. So if you can have 5.3, 5.5 for the whole year, that's incredible. Next year, then we have to look at other sectors, which is why our tourism minister has been saying he wants to make sure you get 5 million visitors from China, so that your economy doesn't just depend on one sector. If that sector goes down, then your economy is affected, right? I got semicon, I got my natural resources, I got the tourist arrivals, the hospitality side to help boost up. So I think next year, even should there be a severe US recession for 2025, I think Malaysia will still be doing pretty well. In that kind of scenario, if we can have a 4 to 4.5% GDP growth, I think that would be tremendous. That would be very great.
Amazing. And that was Teng Boo from Capital Dynamics. Thank you for your insightful discussion and to help us understand better what's going on the whole US market woes and the bloodbath that happened earlier. And basically what I can recap here is Malaysia is doing pretty well compared to other countries, and we are somehow more or less in recession already for US, and China is especially the important economy right now and in the future. And the question is, will China be the savior for a global economy? That will be the question. But I think that's all for now, and you can find this whole discussion on all of our social media platforms, and I'll see you next time.